Paul George is probably the biggest free agent this offseason outside of LeBron James. Every single team will be trying to figure out a way that they can get one of these two big free agents. Some teams might shoot themselves in the foot and make a huge play for LeBron when they might have had a better chance at Paul George. This video will ignore the absolute wild card that is LeBron James and his free agency, and instead focus on the upcoming free agency of Paul George. What factors do I think are important, where will he sign, and how much of an impact will he make? The first thing to look at is who has the salary cap space to make a move for George. The teams that have space cleanly are the Lakers, the Bulls, Mavericks, Hawks, 76ers, and the Kings. And then the Brooklyn Nets and the Houston Rockets can get there with a little bit of wiggle room. But who out of this group is actually a chance for the talented two-way wing? I think you can rule the Bulls, Mavericks, Hawks, Kings, and Nets out, as PG has made it clear that winning is important to him. Those teams are simply too many pieces away from realistically contending for a strong playoff run, and I'd be shocked if Paul George went to any of these teams. That leaves us with the Lakers and their enormous cap space, the 76ers and their incredible young talent, and the Houston Rockets and their amazing guard lineup and all-around team. And of course, re-signing with OKC, Westbrook, Adams, and Carmelo Anthony is a strong option. And let's start with that. What are the odds that Paul George stays with his squad from this year, the one that got defeated by a rookie-led Utah Jazz team? The biggest factor in this will be money, but in many ways, I think this actually works against the Thunder. If Paul George had have made the All-NBA team this season, he would have been eligible for a Supermax from the Thunder, but he most likely won't and therefore can only sign for 30% of the salary cap for 5 years. But here's the thing, every other team in the league can offer him a 4-year deal with 30% of the salary cap also. Each of these deals would come with a player option to allow Paul to sign a new, bigger deal as soon as possible. And this is the big problem for OKC. Paul George is 28 years old, and when he re-enters free agency will be the biggest concern on his mind. Paul George will earn the same amount of money in the next 3 years no matter where he plays, but he'll want to maximize the earnings in the 4 years after that. By coming back into free agency at 31 instead of 32, Paul will be a lot more likely to get another max offer and therefore maximize the money he gets over his career. Now, he still might get a max offer at 32, and his agent may push him to take the most guaranteed money, as that is what benefits the agent the most, so we don't know for sure. But from a pure monetary standpoint, I don't think OKC can offer him actually that much more true value. But Oklahoma City Thunder are still a really solid option in terms of basketball. George could sign with them and they would run back their team of George, Westbrook, Adams, and Carmelo Anthony. Plus, they would have Roberson back from injury, someone who was exceptionally good for them. That starting lineup was incredible for the OKC, and their defense was one of the best in the league when all five played together. I think they would have done a lot better in the playoffs if Dre hadn't have gotten injured. But the biggest problem with this roster is Carmelo Anthony. There is no doubt in my mind that he will opt into his juicy $27 million a year contract, as there is simply no way he can get this on the open market. This will max out the cap space for the Thunder, and the only way they can get more talent in is through trades. But they have very limited talent to trade, and trading future picks will only limit the best way they can progress in the future, through the draft. Presti has nailed draft picks in the past, and getting Terrence Ferguson was a great get so late in the draft. However, he simply needs time to develop. So the reality is, Paul George is probably choosing between the same OKC team or a new one. He and Westbrook got along well and at times played very well together, so he may come back. But from a pure basketball point of view, there are better options out there, being the Philadelphia 76ers and the Houston Rockets. The hardest team for him to get to is the Houston Rockets, as they would have to find a trade partner for Ryan Anderson and then hold off signing Chris Paul and Clint Capella until they had signed Paul George. It asks for the Rockets to risk a lot, and I think it is quite unlikely to happen, but the reward is definitely there. PG would be perfect to play alongside Harden, Paul, and Capella. He's proven in OKC that he is simply an absurd wing option. He can run off screens and rise up to hit three-pointers in the most contested of situations. He can post up smaller wings, and then you can give him the ball with the shot clock running down, and he will get a decent shot up. PG is a very talented scorer, and he would fit the pace and space system of Harden and Paul so well. Those two players are so unselfish and are gifted passers that will look to give Paul George the ball in his spots. Westbrook is also an amazing player, but his passing ability is slightly different to James Harden and Chris Paul's. He relies on using his athleticism and quickness to break the defense down and then pass out to shooters or lob to the rim when Adams gets free. He isn't as amazing as specifically setting his teammates up or knowing how to manage an offense to get Paul George or Melo into a rhythm. It is a subtle difference and doesn't make Westbrook a worse player, simply a different one. And Paul George fits better with Paul and Harden's style of play. I shudder to think what they would look like with the three of them flanked by Capella and a shooting wing. They likely wouldn't be able to re-sign Trevor Ariza, but I'm sure Daryl Morey would conjure someone up to play defense and knock down threes in his absence. Where George would help the Rockets the most is his defense. He's a proven elite wing defender who has come up huge against Durant and the Warriors before, and that is the biggest hole for Houston. With George, they would match up incredibly well with the Warriors and could seriously scare the living daylights out of them, something that they might do this series anyway. But the moves to create the cap space are tough to make, and a much cleaner option exists out east for Paul George. There's been a ton of talk about LeBron James going to Philadelphia, but to be perfectly honest, I don't see it anywhere near as much as I see Paul George going there. James and Simmons would have diminishing returns. They both need the ball badly in hand to create offense for their teammates. Whilst LeBron could play off ball and shoot threes, he has spent his whole career having the ball in his hands for 70% of the time on court. If he did this, is Simmons going to be able to spot up in the corners? No. And that's why I think Paul George makes more sense in Philadelphia, and why I think they should seriously pursue him this offseason. He's previously played with Roy Hibbert and Miles Turner, and will be able to play alongside Joel Embiid. Plus, Simmons is almost the perfect guard for him. So many times, Simmons will run a play where he turns and screens while passing the ball to Covington for a deep three. Well, Paul George can also hit those deep threes, and is more versatile on the attack off the dribble than Covington. But just for a moment, imagine a lineup of, say, Ben Simmons, Robert Covington, Paul George, Dario Saric, and Joel Embiid. A point guard and a center, and then three wings who can shoot and defend. And then Dario and Paul George can attack off the dribble and post up also. This lineup would be absolutely unreal, and if LeBron moved west or even stayed in Cleveland, they would be able to compete for a spot in the finals. Plus, with Simmons, Covington, and Embiid all locked up, George could guarantee that they would be contending for at least 4 years that he is there. If I was Paul George, this is where I would go. Great team, max contract, awesome city that will likely contend for a long time, and a pass-first point guard and an amazing two-way center. But sadly for Philly fans, I'm not Paul George. And Paul George has had one team circulate around his name for the last 4 years. The Los Angeles Lakers. Let's face it, George has basically done everything except literally say that he's going to LA. He was born and raised in Los Angeles and grew up following the Lakers and idolizing Kobe Bryant. You can bet every dollar you have that when he was young, he would hit shots in the backyard gym, imagining he was a Laker. Well, now he has a chance to pull on the purple and gold for real and hit those shots in Staples Center. Plus, the Lakers have an exceptionally good cap situation, with their books clean as in preparation for a salary spending spree. The Lakers have $60 million in cap space this offseason. The front office did a fantastic job of wiping the slate clean and creating the space to go after unrestricted free agents. Usually, having $30 million in cap space puts you in the running for all free agents. But when your team is bad, there isn't much appeal to joining them over a team already making the playoffs. But when you have the capacity to go and get 2 free agents, players can agree to come together and instantly revolutionize the team. This is similar to what happened in Miami when LeBron and Bosh came to join Wade, and the Lakers will be hoping that they can do something similar. DeMarcus Cousins is also a free agent this offseason, and if the Lakers could somehow pitch the idea of both of them coming to LA, it could be enticing enough to convince them. To complement this pitch, the Lakers will be relying on the talents of Lonzo Ball, Kyle Kuzma, and Brandon Ingram. The 3 players would actually perfectly balance with DeMarcus Cousins and Paul George. This would give the Lakers a starting lineup with 4 good shooters, an incredible big man, and great defenders in George and Ingram. I think this team could contend for a spot in the Western Conference playoffs, and with a few years of playing together, even potentially a championship. This offer would be awfully enticing for PG, but it relies on Cousins agreeing to come to the Lakers as well. Even without DeMarcus Cousins, I still think the Lakers are a chance to snag George by offering him the starring role on this team. The Rockets and Philadelphia already have their stars, and George would be a complementary piece there. His desire to be a star might just lead him to the Lakers. Another team that could offer him more of a starring role is actually the Utah Jazz. They already have Donovan Mitchell as the new face of the franchise, but could really use an established scorer such as Paul George to take the pressure off their young star. To get the cap space for Paul George, the Jazz would have to waive Cephalosha and Jerebko, as well as organising a trade to get rid of Alec Burks without receiving much salary back at all. These moves are completely doable, and the Jazz as a basketball prospect could be appealing to George. They have Donovan Mitchell, Ricky Rubio, Joe Ingles, and Gobert locked up, as well as Jay Crowder. With George, they would be an absolutely incredible defensive team, and he would add the scoring punch they need to put them over the top. At this point, I think that George will likely go to the Lakers, but he is such a flexible player that he could fit and contribute on any team. His free agency will be one of the most interesting to watch this season, as teams prioritize chasing LeBron and Paul George and try to lure the elite wings to their franchise. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more videos in the future, and let me know what you think of Paul George and his free agency decision this summer.